Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Carlton People. Now I've got a man by the name of Steve White, who I've known for a little while now. You may have heard us on the Train Spotters podcast with Dimmy, pouring our little hearts out about the Carlton Football Club. I finally got him on. Steve, welcome to your episode of Carlton People, mate.
Terry, thank you very much for having me.
I must say I'm very envious of the facial hair. That's not something I'm able to do.
You know what? My moustache, I've just went out and I didn't expect we're going to be talking about this. I just went out and bought some wax because my moustache grows like that.
Wow.
It's horrible. So I got some wax and now it's actually starting to shape quite nicely. So I'm pretty proud of it.
Mate, good for you. I'm proud of it for you.
Thank you.
Mate, like I said, this has been some time in the making, but we got you here. And I guess the best way to start is the way I always start these episodes. So why don't you run me and the audience through exactly how you became a Carlton supporter? What happened?
Yeah, sure. So it's a family of split between Carlton and Collingwood. So my grandpa was Collingwood. We grew up with our grandparents. So my grandpa's Collingwood. My grandpa's Carlton. My mum's Carlton. And then my sister was Collingwood. My brother went off and he's Essendon. He's the only one that's split from the pack. But all my cousins were Collingwood. My cousin's one of my best mates. So I'd always go to a lot of Collingwood games. Collingwood games were always a feature of the family. And I was very nearly a Collingwood supporter. I think I may have told you this previously, but the game that Mick McGuan did that 7 bounces against us at the G, Carlton Collingwood, I went there thinking I'm going to be a Collingwood supporter.
Wow. And
Collingwood beat us that day, but I walked out thinking, I just can't do it. I am Carlton. I can't be brainwashed. So that was, that was when I decided 100% Carlton, because I was sort of toing and froing. I was probably 8 or 9 at the time, and I was toing and froing, and walked out of that game thinking, nah, definitely Carlton.
Fascinating. Oh, that was my next question. How old were you? So you remember that moment? That's a pretty early memory.
Yeah, I remember that day. I still remember the very first game I ever went to. And it was a Carlton-Richmond game. It was a Friday night. And I don't remember much of the game. I just remember I went with my uncle. And it would have been 1993, I reckon, 93, 94. And I remember go back in the days where you could just walk in and sit wherever you wanted, basically. So we were sitting on the boundary, level 1, in the pocket. And it was just like, as a 7, 8-year-old, I was like, oh, this is amazing. And I remember, the only bit I remember of the game is Adrian Gleeson coming down when midfielders used to rest in the forward pocket. Coming down, I just remember the size of his calves and just how big he was, And he was probably only one of our smaller players back then. But to me, as a 7 or 8-year-old, I was like, wow, this is amazing,
Wow. So you caught some of the good days before it turned to shit.
I pretty much only grew up with my young. So I was 10 in 95 when we won the flag, and I remember that day. And I remember 93 when we lost to Essendon in the grand final. I was up in Queensland, so in 93 I would have been 8. So I remember being in Queensland on grand final day. And most of my childhood was all just winning. We barely lost.
Wow.
So when it turned, I was 17, 18 when it really turned to shit.
Wow. Interesting. So before I talk about the great teams and their makeup and what made them great, who were the heroes? Because my theory is when you start barracking for a club, you latch onto players, and then as you get older, the sense of community comes, and then the club means more. So do you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. Kuda was a main one. But I was a big Silvani fan.
Okay.
Loved Sauce. I played fullback as a kid. So I latched onto him. I modelled my game on him.
Wow.
As a young teenager. Yeah, so Sauce was a massive one. That number one was the first number I ever had on the back of a jumper. And then it kind of slowly turned to Ratton. And I had number 7 on my back for a long time. And then I've always wanted to, whenever I played footy, I've wanted to wear number 7.
I've heard about Rats, like the champion that he was, and people talk about how he actually started on a half-back flank before he got moved into the midfield. Yeah. Is that right?
I don't really remember that. Although saying that, I think he might have been on a half-back flank in the 93 grand final. I was really young. Like I said, I was only about 8. But yeah, I remember him predominantly as a midfielder. And you just knew what you were going to get.
Yep.
You know, he wasn't the star that, you know, that they'd roll out for all the interviews if there was post-match games interviews, but he was like an unsung hero, if you want to say, you know. But just a superstar player. He was just an absolute jet.
All the tough stuff.
Yeah.
So, what do you remember about grand final day, 95? Like you said, you were in you're in Queensland for 93.
93, 95.
Yep. So what happens in 95?
Well, I remember watching it at home. And then, so we had a group of mates around the streets that, you know, we all played footy with there was a little park on the corner down the end of the street. And I remember them coming about half time. And they were just, the game's done, you know, let's go play footy. So I got roped out to going and playing footy down the street about half time, which I'm a little bit bummed about. But I've watched it enough times since to, you know, really feel it. But I had a 95 Premier's cap that I wore I've still got photos of when I was a kid that I was attached to this hat. Did not take it off.
Love it.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to picture, I was 4. I was born in 91, so I don't really remember 95. I remember little flashes, and I remember watching it on a VHS tape and all of that. I'm kind of at that age, well, we're at that age now where things that we were doing as kids are so far beyond what's available now. It's kind of cool to see how technology's taken over.
Can I just say, 90, wrong way. That's the 95 premiership photo.
You love that. You love to see that.
Yeah, sorry, I got sidetracked. Sorry, what was your question again?
Too busy dreaming about flags, mate. What a life.
I know.
No, I was saying it's funny because I remember 95. I don't remember much of 95. Yeah. I remember watching it years later on a VHS tape. And it's just funny how that just seems so crazy right now in the world we live in. And I guess that's probably a good segue into like the next part. Like you've experienced, you know, 90s footy. We now move into this 2022 season. We're filming this just before the season kicks off. How have you noticed the change in the game, not only in the way it's played, but in the way that we absorb it?
Well, it's definitely it's a lot more of a business now, that's for sure. You know, back when I used to go, you know, the players would train on a Tuesday, Thursday night. You know, I used to go out to training. It was like, you know, 4:30 they'd start, you know, proper like the days of local footy now sort of thing. So yeah, it's definitely become full time and there's a lot more money thrown into it. You know, back then a lot of guys were working part-time jobs or full-time jobs, you know, and going to training and playing on a weekend. You know, there's obviously a lot more coverage now and it feels a lot more of it's a midfielder's game. You know, you even look at the Brownlow, it's become a midfielder's award. The last time was probably Scotty Wine that won other than a midfielder. So that's the biggest change I would say. And then, you know, streaming off, you know, social media coming into all that sort of stuff as well has changed the game a lot too. You've got a lot more access to players now. I feel like through the 90s and early 2000s, it felt a lot more simpler, I suppose.
And it's funny. It's funny because the whole point of technology is to like connect us or simplify things. But when you talk about social media, it has complicated things a little bit more. There's a lot more access. There's a lot more, not only access to the players, but access to information. And then there's a lot more power distribution now. It's not just you absorb the information given to you from the mainstream media, whether it be the newspaper or, early internet and, the Herald Sun articles online or whatnot. It's more, anyone can build a platform now and talk about what's going on and push forward an agenda if they really wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah. So 95, happy as Larry, Blue Heaven, salary cap era. What do you remember about that?
I just felt I've probably broken, like not knowing, because like I said, like I lived through, and even like 99, riding the high of that, even still, that's, still the game we talk about, it's one of the best games that I ever saw, an individual performance from Kuda. But away from that, I suppose, 2000, 2001 was still pretty successful. And then, 2002. So, I'm coming 17, 18, and it's,
wow.
Yeah, it's just, I didn't know you didn't know whether the club was going to survive. Like, what was going to happen? Like, it was all over the papers for weeks, it's all you could see. And it's devastating as a supporter.
I think especially coming into that age group that you were, like you're becoming an adult, early adult, 18 years old, and the club was gutted. And in many respects, we kind of gutted the club again, not the club, but probably more the playing list in, 2014, 15, when we started again, even though we had done a rebuild, 2005, 6, 7, and then 2008 get jarred and then go through all of that. I actually don't even want to talk about that era. I'll acknowledge that they existed because great, but I do want to get into the meat of 2022 in this group. Just give me an overview. Like, how do you see this group now entering year 7 of the rebuild?
It's funny. I was just talking about this with a little daughter who's 5. So at school pickup, I was talking to a Bulldog supporter, and he was talking us up a fair bit. I was trying to play it down just a little, but I genuinely, for the first time, for as long as I can remember, feel like we genuinely have some depth now.
Okay.
Before within the last 3 or 4 years, I just feel like if we lost a couple of players, we were probably screwed. A couple of key players. I feel, and touch wood, we don't. But even you look at Sam Walsh going down. I know it's only pre-season games, but we've got a couple of players that can step in now and take that load. So I feel like, for the first time in a long time, we've actually got some depth to work with, some really good young kids coming through, and a good core group of players that are, the starting lineup.
I found it fascinating how quickly Michael Voss was wanting to change the narrative after being asked about, I think it all started with the Sam Walsh question, what are you going to do? Sam Walsh is hurt and whatnot. And I really enjoyed how matter of fact he was about how we need to change the narrative and how it's not going to be about Sam Walsh. And I think when we saw in the second practice match against Melbourne, like it was not about Jacob Wiedering missing. We didn't even talk about it. It was like, these are the guys that are out there and this is what they're being asked to do. I'm with you. I mean, we haven't played, a regular season match yet. So it is very much like us to try and draw a positive conclusion from the hope that we have. And I'm hoping that we're not watching this, years down the track and laughing at ourselves with how silly we thought we were going to be, good we were going to be. But it just has to happen in terms of, like, for a moment, let's forget about winning a flag, but just an improvement. Like at the very least, a genuine improvement, I feel, isn't much to ask for this year.
It has to happen. It just has to. Like it's been so long since we've really had genuine hope. Like I feel like the last 3 or 4 years, I've been trying to convince myself each preseason that we're going to be all right. We're going to be good. Not really believing it. I really believe it now that the players are coming to the right age bracket. They're putting on. You look at the size of like TDK. They're putting those skinny young players are really starting to put on some good size, and they're looking the fittest I've seen them in a long time. So there's real belief or hope that this next step will come this year.
Who are This year, I'm with you. Who are the guys you latch onto now from this group? The ones that you really think are going to lead us forward?
I think Sammy Fisher. Zach Fisher's pretty important. He was looking really good. Yeah, Durden looks good. I really like the pressure he puts on. I mean, we've got Chera coming into his prime, which should really help out Cripps. Hewitt is big. I think Williams is looking the fittest he's looked since coming to us. So you get Williams, Sard linking up. There's a lot of good things there. And hopefully Setterfield can really come on. I've been a big fan of his since he come on. It hasn't lived up to the hopes that I really thought he would, but hopefully those sorts of outside fringe sort of players can help with that load, especially through the midfield.
It's early. It's still early days, but he seems to have had like a year back from his knee Rico, and then a really, I wouldn't call it a breakout year, but a most improved year 2020, and then 2021 not so good. Still think it's very early on a guy like him. He's got plenty of meat to fill out with his body as well. You touched on your daughter. What's her situation with the footy? Is she observant? Is she a Carlton supporter? Is she not sure yet? Is she weighing up her options?
She is. She latched onto Kerno really young, Charlie.
Okay.
She used to Big Charlie, she'd call him. But at the moment, so she's just started prep this year, and she's obviously got one of her good friends that's a Bomber supporter. So she'd come home a couple of days. I'm an Essendon supporter. And I'll say, no, you're not.
Disaster, mate.
Yeah, but she's up and down. Her mum's West Coast, so she, but she knows more of the Carlton players than she does any other. So, but she is observant to water, and she will ask me if the boys had a win on the weekend or anything like that. And she is starting to kick a footy, so that's exciting.
Okay. I don't have children, but I imagine it being a very important responsibility, to carry on the tradition. Like this is the reason why we have so many fans is because we have a fan base that's rich in success, had a lot of babies. It was easy. It was an easy sell. It's a very hard sell now.
It is.
It's a very hard sell.
So I've got an 11-year-old boy as well, who's just mad sport. He's a big footballer.
Yep.
Almost lost him to Richmond, but he's stuck fat.
Good.
He says he's Carlton, but he's, like I say to him, I grew up giving it. I was never copying shit for being a Carlton supporter. We won all the time.
Yeah.
So it sounds so foreign to me for him to be embarrassed to say I'm a Carlton supporter as a kid. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So hopefully he can see some success because he is sort of latching on to other players from other teams. So, I want him to latch onto some Carlton players and be proud to say I'm a Carlton boy, Yeah,
of course. I want to touch on your podcast, and I want to touch on more in particular as particular guest you had. But before we talk about that, you run a couple of podcasts. Tell us about the work that you do.
So Brothers and Others is a podcast with my brother, and it's predominantly mental health based. But we have had a few ex-footy sort of related people. Greg Williams, Diesel being the one you're speaking about. But yeah, so it's sort of talking about people's sort of struggles and this is your life type podcast, and talking about ups and downs of life. So that's that one in a nutshell. And if people do go and listen to the Diesel one, I had a lot of issues with my microphone that week. So the sound is quite horrible at the start. But a man we spoke about just before, Dimmy, helped me out a lot with fixing that sound. So hopefully it's not too unbearable. And then another one I'm starting is called Centre for Men, which is heavily mental health side of things as well. And that'll be a podcast, obviously, again, around mental health. But, with some lighter episodes, because it can get quite heavy, that conversation, and that's needed. But it also, so there's another mate of mine that we're doing it with, that we've both been through our mental health struggles, and we try to lighten it a bit, make fun of ourselves in a bit, and just have a bit of fun with that. And then there'll be some sort of retreats and I'm big into my cold therapy, so ice bars and all that sort of stuff. We'll be running some workshops and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, keep an eye out for those if you.
For sure. I will link both of them in the description below, so people can definitely come and check out your work. But after that, I need to ask you some questions about the upcoming season. I need some predictions. I didn't prep you for this, and I didn't do it for a reason. I wanted to get your answers on the spot so we can look at them at the end of the year. So a couple of questions. Number one is, who's going to lead the goal kicking this year?
Harry.
With how many?
65 just came into my head.
Okay, very nice. Who will win our best and fairest?
I think Cripps.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he can go to I think he can get back to that form that he was in 2019, was it, maybe? Yeah, I think he can really get back to that form with the players we brought in.
Yep. Who will be the breakout player? Almost improved. That type of that player that really, hasn't really lit the competition on fire yet, but this is the year.
Yeah. I still feel Fisher's got a couple of levels to go to. So I really hope that he will go to another level and play some consistent injury-free footy. Yes.
That really is the big one. I think we all say it. We are such a team with the situation of if X stays fit, if he just has 8 games in a row, should he, could he, if only. So I think Fisher's definitely one of those if players.
Yeah, definitely.
The final one is, what is the year that we lift up the Premiership Cup?
I mean, there's always a smoky, so I'd love to say it's this year, but I don't believe it will be this year. But I think within the next 3 years, I think we really have to. We've got to. When I say we have to, it's obviously the hardest thing to win, but I think we can with the group we've built and are building that within. So what's that? We've got 2022, 23. So by 2024, I hope we have won.
It's got a good ring to it, 2024. I like it.
Yeah.
Something about it. We could be going back to back. I don't know.
Let's start a dynasty. Let's go 3.
Yeah. I just want one. I seriously just want one. Just give me one. I'm not asking for a lot, but I know that when one comes, I'm going to want 2 and 3.
Oh, yeah, 100%. You want that, as they say, sustained success. But yeah, being my son's age was the last time I saw one. Like it feels like.
That's crazy.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah. That is actually crazy. Well, fingers crossed that our predictions come true for this year. I think if all of those things you predicted for us come true, we're going to be a much better side. I think also if we get that second forward, if it's Charlie, Charlie can kick 30 plus goals, then we got that second option and that third option. And, I hope we just enjoy this season for what it could potentially be. That's the main thing.
Yeah, let's have more wins than losses. Let's maybe start there with that one.
I like that. Win be above 500. I like it.
Yeah.
Mate, it's been great. Thank you so much for your time. That's the most precious asset that you have. So to give me some of that is, I'm really grateful for it, and we'll be in touch for sure.
Thank you very much. It was an honor to come on. Thank you.